Maybe we'd be more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt if this sort of thing didn't happen over and over and over and over again. The fact of the matter is the now deleted video is bad enough that he deleted it, of Donald Trump shared on social media late yesterday, alluding to a unified Reich among possible futures should he win re-election, is just the very latest instance in what has become a now years-long pattern. Here's what we're talking about. A flurry of made-up headlines from a potential second Trump presidency. They read, for example, economy booms, 15 million illegal aliens deported, and in smaller text, quote, industrial strength significantly increased, driven by the creation of a unified Reich. In addition to taking this video down 19 hours after, the Trump campaign said this in a statement, quote, this was not a campaign video. It was created by a random account online and reposted by a staffer who clearly did not see the word while the president was in court, end quote. President Biden began his 2020 candidacy with the words Charlottesville, Virginia, for what happened at the neo-Nazi rally there. Now, in 2024, a campaign spokesman is responding this way. Quote, Donald Trump posting a unified Reich video is part of a pattern of his praise for dictators and of echoing anti-Semitic tropes. He is a threat to our democracy, and Americans must reject him and stand up for our democracy this November. Joining our coverage, former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy. Also joining us, former senator and co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast, Claire McCaskill. Tim, you also know everything there is to know from investigating the events in Charlottesville. Donald Trump's affinity for Nazi Germany is well documented in a couple of books about the Trump presidency from my husband Mike Schmidt, from Susan Glasser and Peter Baker. There is a lot of reporting on General Kelly's deep concern about his affinity for who Trump referred to as the German soldiers. This is not new for Trump.
No, when I saw the story today, Nicole, it brought me right back to those comments that the then president made after Charlottesville, right? Literally in the wake of a horrific event where you have literal Nazis marching through the town where I live. He says there are very fine people on both sides, praising those neo-Nazis. That only made things worse. It was like fuel on the fire of racism and anger that was on display in Charlottesville. Maybe once it's an accident, it's a misstep, but when it happens again and again and again, this imagery, as you said, praising the Third Reich, it's hard to call it an accident. And it has real consequences. We talk all the time, Nicole, on the show about how his words, the things that he posts, the things that he says are taken quite literally by a lot of people. We saw that on January 6th.
Claire, again, we don't do this often, but to sort of underscore the points Tim Heaphy's making, here is Trump in his own words.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me. We pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. We got a lot of work to do. You know, when they let, I think the real number is 15, 16 million people into our country, when they do that, we got a lot of work to do. They're poisoning the blood of our country.
Trump gets graded on a curve, Claire, because he's viewed as so ignorant, and he is that. But by now, you know, vermin, poisoning the blood of our country, these are allusions that he's acutely aware of by this point, and he says them on purpose.
Yeah, a couple of things. First, if this was a staffer that did this, and it's a really serious mistake. And what a normal campaign would do is immediately make that staffer leave the campaign, and there would be consequences for something that is so unbelievably out of line for a man trying to run to be in charge of, I think, one of the most important democracies in the world in terms of how it was established and how long it's been in existence and how the rule of law has maintained itself even through political ups and downs. And the other thing, Nicole, I don't think we do enough of is talking about how Trump is worse today than he was in 2020 and much worse than he was in 2016. The things he says are more extreme. He celebrates more the dark corners of dictatorship. He says he would eliminate the Constitution. He brags about using the military in a domestic way in our country, not against foreign enemies, but here against people in this country. He talks about deporting 15 million people, ignoring what the current law is in this country in terms of their status. So it is really much worse than it was before. And he brags about how he will no longer have anybody around him that is not willing to go as far as he wants to go. I mean, this is really scary stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, I think that January 6th for him was the opening up, right, of a new chapter. And it wasn't the funneling in of the behavior because he got caught. It was the opening up and the embrace of political violence. I mean, he can read a poll. I'm not sure what else he reads, but he can read a poll. And he sees that he has successfully moved a lot of members of his own base to accept, when necessary, political violence. What do you make of all these dots that, again, at this point, it's on us if we don't connect them?
Yeah, we developed some evidence during the Select Committee's investigation about Dan Scavino's role as sort of the portal to social media, that he would monitor and then sometimes repost or repost things. And there were times where there were pretty explicit coded messages that were appealing to these extremist groups. So there's no question that what you call dots are not accidents. They are intentional. January 6th, if there was ever the need for a manifestation of the power that he can unleash with this hateful, vile rhetoric, there it is. And in a weird way, maybe that's empowering to him, or that he sees it as another source of his own agency and power. But as Senator McCaskill says, it's really horribly destructive. I don't think it matters, Nicole, if this is a staffer or not. The fact that he would have someone working for him that would not see this as a problem, and the fact that no one's been held accountable for it, I don't think that makes any difference at all. Anything that goes out under his name, he's ultimately responsible for. So I really think these are dots that are intentional, not accidental, and we need to pay attention to them.
Yeah, I mean, Claire, Stand Back and Stand By was a perfect example. I remember talking to a senior debate advisor, and he said, oh, he's going to walk it back. I said, no, he isn't. He never walked it back, and they showed up on January 6th. I just, for anyone looking for the specifics on his affection and affinity for Nazi Germany, here it is. This is from The Divider by Peter Baker and Susan Glasser. Quote, the president's loud complaint to John Kelly one day was typical, quote, you effing generals. We could stop there and say, oh my God, but I'll keep going. Why can't you be like the German generals? Which generals, John Kelly asked. The German generals in World War II, Trump responded. You do know they tried to kill Hitler 3 times and almost pulled it off, Kelly said. Of course Trump did not know that. No, no, no. They were totally loyal to him, the president said. In his version of history, the generals of the Third Reich had been completely subservient to Hitler. This was the model he wanted for his military. Even in wanting to model Nazi Germany, he gets it wrong, Claire.
Yeah, and you reading that quote reminds me that there are important leaders in the military that are retired now that I believe have a duty to speak up at this moment, including John Kelly. I know John Kelly. I think at his core, he is a good man. I think he thought he was doing the right thing, serving Donald Trump. And I think he tried to stick to his principles in spite of the headwinds he faced in that position. Mattis is the same. Milley is the same. It would be very powerful for these retired top military leaders to begin to sound the alarm to the American people. There are a lot of swing voters that respect the leadership of our military and understand that at its base it is non-political. Their voices would be very powerful in this debate, and I hope before November they speak up.
Yeah, I mean, the country was asked, if you see something, say something. After September 11th, these generals saw everything, and I, too, hope that they say something. Tim